The shadow passes over the moon outside my window tonight, my dear. The wind has stilled. Even the crickets have fallen silent, as if they too hold their breath for the story I must tell you. Come closer. Let the firelight be our only witness. What I am about to share, it is not merely a story of loss. It is an autopsy of a trust so complete, its violation left me a stranger in my own skin. He didn't just steal my money or my home. He stole the very lens through which I saw the world, the foundational belief that goodness once planted must always eventually bloom. And the truth of why he did it, that is what truly, irrevocably broke me. You see, my greatest flaw has always been my most cherished virtue, a radical, almost foolish trust, a belief that at the core of every soul, especially those bound by blood, there exists an ember of inherent decency waiting for a single breath of faith to ignite it. I believed it was my purpose, my sacred duty to be that breath. I saw the danger, my dear. I saw the warning signs as clearly as I see the lines on my own hands, but I chose, with every fiber of my being, to believe the beautiful, comforting lie. I didn't just give him the key to my house. I gave him the key to my peace, my security, my very soul. And I watched, with a quiet, hopeful heart, as he turned it in the lock, closing me out of the life I had built. It began, as these profound betrayals often do, not with a storm, but with a gentle, persistent rain. His name is Julian, my late sister's only son. When she passed, the light seemed to go out of the world for a time. Her final breath was a whisper of his name, a silent, desperate plea in her eyes that I swore on everything holy I would honor. He was 17 then, all sharp angles and a sorrow so deep it seemed to swallow the light around him. He was a silhouette of a boy, standing in the doorway of my quiet, ordered life. I took him in. This old house, which had known only the gentle whispers of a solitary existence, the tick of the grandfather clock, the rustle of book pages, suddenly echoed with the clumsy thud of a teenager's boots and the low thrumming bass of his music. I remember the scent of his cheap, cloying cologne beginning to mix with the familiar aroma of my beeswax candles and simmering chamomile. It was a strange, new fragrance that somehow, against all odds, began to smell like family. The investment was not merely financial. It was an investment of the spirit. I paid for his university, of course. Not just the tuition, but the textbooks that never seemed to be opened, the late-night pizzas, the spring break trip he desperately needed to find himself. I attended every parents' weekend, a stand-in for the mother he lost, beaming with a pride I hoped felt genuine to him. When he graduated, brimming with ambitions that far outstripped his patience, I was his first and most fervent investor. "Auntie," he'd say, his voice so like his mother's it could make my heart ache. "It's a sure thing, a revolutionary app for connecting local artisans. You'll get every penny back, with interest. I'll make you proud." And I would smile, pat his hand, and write the check. The ledger of my giving was not kept in a book, but etched into the very walls of this home, in the worn fabric of the chair he always claimed as his own, in the extra place permanently set at my table. But there were pattern interrupts, moments that, had I been listening to the wise, ancient voice within thee, would have sounded a clarion call. A strange, fleeting coldness in his eyes when I gently asked about a business partner he'd mentioned months prior. The way he'd suddenly need $5,000 for a licensing fee the day after I'd casually mentioned a small inheritance from a distant relative. Once I came home to find him at my desk, not this cozy one by the fire, but the old oak roll top in the study where I keep my most important documents. He jumped as if scalded, quickly shutting a drawer. "Just borrowing a pen, Auntie," he said, his smile a little too wide, a little too quick. "The one in the kitchen is out of ink." My gut, that deep primal organ of truth, coiled into a tight, cold knot. But my heart, my foolish, trusting heart, smoothed it over. He's family. He's grieving. He's trying to find his way. You are his port in the storm. Do not become the storm. Tell me, my dears listening in the quiet of your own spaces, have you ever trusted someone when your entire being was screaming no? Have you ever chosen the beautiful lie because the truth was too terrible to hold? Let me know in the comments. Sometimes simply giving a name to that feeling, sharing it with an understanding soul, is the very first step toward healing the wound it left behind. That phrase, my dear, he's family. It is the most beautiful prison ever built. It locks from the inside, and we throw away the key, believing we are safe. But the bars are made of obligation and memory, and they can hold you fast while everything you hold dear is carried out the front door. The pattern interrupts became more frequent, more jarring, like a drumbeat quickening before fall. A certified letter arrived for him, which he snatched from my hand before I could even read the return address. His phone conversations, once loud and boisterous, became hushed, furtive things, conducted in the backyard, with his back turned to the house, a silent rejection of the warmth within. Then came the Tuesday. I'll never forget it. The sky was the color of dishwater, and a cold, insistent drizzle had been falling for hours, tapping on the window panes like a nervous guest. I was in the study, looking for a particular recipe I'd written on the back of an old bank statement, my famous lavender shortbread, the one your grandmother loved so much. I opened the bottom drawer of the oak desk, the one that always sticks and requires a specific jiggle, and there, tucked not so neatly beneath a faded world atlas, was a crisp yellow manila envelope. It wasn't the envelope itself that sent a chill down my spine. It was the single word written on it in Julian's precise, aggressive handwriting. Leverage. My heart, that traitorous organ, hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The air left the room. With fingers that felt numb and thick, I loosened the brass clasp and slid the contents onto the polished wood of the desk. There were documents. A power of attorney document,
granting him extensive control over my affairs. I had no memory of signing it. It was notarized, dated last fall, when I'd had that terrible bout of flu, when the days had blurred together in a feverish haze. The signature was a shaky, pathetic imitation of my own flowing script. Beneath that were printouts of wire transfers from my primary investment account, my carefully nurtured retirement fund, my safety net, to a corporate entity I'd never heard of, Ethereum Holdings. The totals, listed in a stark, bureaucratic font, made my breath catch in my throat. It was more than a number. It was the evaporation of a future I had worked a lifetime to build. But the final piece of paper, the one that felt like a physical blow to the chest, was a life insurance policy on me. A very, very large one. And the beneficiary was not my favorite charity, not a distant cousin, not even a portion to be donated in his mother's name. It was Julian. Solely. Irrevocably. The room tilted. The drizzle outside seemed to seep through the walls into my very bones. This was the weapon. I held the cold, papery corpse of his betrayal in my hands. The evidence was irrefutable, and yet I was paralyzed. To act on it would be to make it real. To speak it out loud would be to shatter the fragile, curated world I had built around us. To admit that the seedling I had nurtured so tenderly had grown into a poisonous vine, strangling me from the roots up. So I did the unthinkable. I took my phone from my pocket, my hands shaking so violently I almost dropped it. I took pictures of every document, every damning line. I made sure the dates and amounts were clear, and then, with a care that felt like a sacrilege, I placed them back in the envelope exactly as I found them, nestled beneath the weight of the world. I said nothing. For days I moved through the house like a ghost, smiling at his jokes, passing him the mashed potatoes at dinner, all while this terrible secret festered between us, a silent, growing tumor. The suspense, my dears, is a unique kind of torture. It is the constant, low hum of dread beneath the surface of the ordinary. It's watching someone you love, knowing they are holding a knife behind their back, and praying to every god you've ever heard of that they never, ever decide to use it. He knew I knew something. I could see it in the new, calculating wariness in his gaze, the way he'd study me over the rim of his coffee cup when he thought I wasn't looking. The air in the house grew thick and heavy with unspoken accusations. It all came to a head one evening over a roasted chicken and rosemary potatoes, his favorite. He was talking too loudly, too cheerfully, about his business finally taking off, about investors lining up. It's all about to pay off, Auntie. All that faith you had in me. It's finally going to be rewarded. I simply listened, my hands folded neatly in my lap, until his monologue dwindled into the clinking of cutlery. Julian, I said, my voice dangerously, unnervingly calm, I was in the study the other day, looking for my lavender shortbread recipe. His fork stilled halfway to his mouth. "Oh," he said, a mask of casual indifference sliding over his features, but I saw the slight tightening around his eyes. Yes, it was quite the search. I had to look in the bottom drawer, the one that sticks. He said nothing, but the color began to drain from his face, leaving 2 spots of high, sharp color on his cheekbones. I found something quite interesting in there. An envelope. The affable mask slipped, and for a terrifying, exhilarating second, I saw the raw, calculating man beneath. The boy was gone. "That's private, Auntie," he said, his voice dropping, losing its performative warmth. "Is it?" I asked, my voice so soft it was almost a whisper. "When it contains forgeries of my signature and policies on my life, I would argue that makes it very, very much my business." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the frantic crackle of the fire in the hearth. He didn't deny it. He didn't explode in a fit of rage. He just looked at me with a cold, flat expression I had never seen before. An expression that belonged to a stranger. "You never saw me," he said, his voice low and venomous. "Not really. You saw a project, a broken thing that needed the great, benevolent Auntie Whispers to fix. You poured your money and your little hearthside wisdom lectures into me like I was some barren patch of earth you were determined to make bloom. But you never once asked me what I wanted to plant there. You never considered that I might not want to be your beautiful, well-tended garden. This was the why. This was the core insecurity, the deep-seated envy and fear of lacks finally given voice. His malice was not born of pure storybook evil, but of a twisted, festering sense of inadequacy. In his eyes, my generosity was not love. It was control. My comfort was a constant, silent reminder of his dependency. He saw my life, my peaceful, ordered, secure life, as something I flaunted, and he felt entitled to tear it down, to claim it as his own, because he believed I had stolen his chance to build his own from the ground up. He was drowning in a sea of his own making, and he blamed me for not having built him a boat. He stood up, his chair scraping harshly, violently against the wooden floor. "You have no idea what I'm capable of," he whispered, the words hanging in the air like a threat. And then he turned and left the room. I sat at the table, surrounded by the ruins of our Last Supper, the truth of his justification settling over me like a leaden shroud. It was a poison that worked faster than any lie, because a part of me, a small, horrified part, wondered if he was right. Had I, in my quest to be a savior, become his jailer?
The quiet after that dinner was the most menacing sound I have ever heard. Julian didn't leave the house. He simply retreated into his room, a silent volcano waiting to erupt. The eruption came not with a bang, but with a series of official, crisp envelopes that began to arrive in my mailbox, each one a new tile in the mosaic of my undoing. The first was a notice from the bank.
a missed mortgage payment, then another. I had set up automatic payments years ago. I called the bank, my voice trembling only slightly. The polite, disembodied voice on the other end informed me that the auto pay had been canceled by me. According to their records, I had called and authorized it, providing all my security information. The power of attorney. He was using it. Then came the letter from the county, an eviction notice. This house, this sanctuary that had held the echoes of my sister's laughter and the ghost of my own hopes, was being taken from me. I stood in my own hallway, holding that piece of paper, and felt the floor drop out from under me. This was no longer about money, it was about roots. He was tearing mine out of the ground. The final, most humiliating blow came in the form of a visit from a social worker, a kind-faced woman with sad eyes, sent by Adult Protective Services, following an anonymous report expressing concern for my mental well-being, citing confusion, financial mismanagement, and paranoia. He was not just robbing me, he was systematically dismantling my credibility, my very sanity. I served her tea in my best china, my hand steady only through a force of will I didn't know I possessed, and answered her gentle, probing questions with a clarity that I hoped masked the sheer, screaming terror inside. After she left, I sank to the floor in the kitchen, the cool linoleum against my cheek, and I wept. I wept for the boy I had loved, for the sister I had failed, for the home I was losing. This was the absolute nadir, the dark night of the soul where the light seems like a forgotten dream. But my dear, it is in that absolute darkness that the smallest spark becomes a beacon. Lying there on the floor, I remembered something my own mother used to say. A tree that bends in the storm does not break. It is the rigid branch that snaps. I had been rigid in my trust, in my identity as the unwavering, forgiving confidant. It was time to bend. It was time to transform that radical trust into courageous confidence. I made an appointment with a lawyer, not a family friend, not a gentle old man who handled wills, but a shark. Her name was Eleanor Vance, and her office was all sharp angles, glass, and steel, a world away from my soft, firelit home. I laid the photographed documents before her. I told her everything. I did not cry. I did not waver. I presented the facts, and I saw a cold, focused fire ignite in her eyes. She said, "We will fight this," her voice like the closing of a vault door. "This is predatory. It's fraud, and we will win." And as we began to build our case, subpoenaing bank records and phone logs, we discovered the major twist, the one that shifted this from a personal tragedy to a moral crusade. Eleanor, in her brilliant, ruthless digging, found transactions I had never seen. Small, regular cash transfers to a woman named Chloe. We found her. She was a sweet, mousy-haired thing, 22 years old, with eyes that had seen too much disappointment, and she was 5 months pregnant. Julian's child. He had met her shortly after graduating, woven his web of charm and potential around her. He'd taken her savings for his business, moved her into a shabby apartment, and isolated her from her friends. When she found out she was pregnant, he became controlling, threatening. The money he was stealing from me wasn't just for his ego. It was to maintain control over her, to keep her dependent and terrified. My fight was no longer just to save my home. It was to save this girl, this innocent child, from the same soul-crushing manipulation. It was to break a cycle of poison before it could claim another generation. I invited Chloe here, to this very room. I served her tea, just as I'm picturing you now. I showed her the documents. I told her my story. And she, in a voice barely above a whisper, told me hers. We were two sides of the same coin, both victims of the same beautiful, destructive lie. In that moment, my courageous confidence became a protective fury. This was no longer about reclaiming my past. It was about safeguarding the future. The legal proceedings happened in sterile courtrooms, a ballet of motions and objections. We won, of course. The forgeries were exposed. The power of attorney was revoked. The transfers were traced and frozen. The house was saved. But that is not the climax, my dear. The true confrontation, the moment of heartful healing, did not happen before a judge. It happened here. Julian had been served with the injunction barring him from the property and my accounts. But he came one last time, believing he could still bully or charm his way back in. He let himself in with his key, the one I had foolishly never taken back, and found me waiting for him in this chair, by this fire. Chloe was with me, standing quietly by the bookshelf, a silent pillar of strength. He looked from her to me, and his arrogance faltered for a second, replaced with confusion, then dawning rage. What is she doing here? I said, "This is my home, Julian," my voice not loud, but carrying a finality that filled the room. I decide who is welcome here, and you are not. He said, "This is my home too, after everything I've done for you." You have done nothing for me. You have only taken. You took my money. You tried to take my home. You tried to take my sanity, but you could not take my soul. And you will not take theirs. I gestured to Chloe, to the subtle curve of her belly. His face contorted. You don't understand anything, you with your perfect little quiet life. You never knew what it was like to have nothing, to be nothing. I knew what it was like to lose a sister. I whispered, and the room went still. I knew what it was like to have my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces, and I knew what it was like to try and build a new family from the fragments. I offered you that, Julian, not a project, a family, your mother's family, and you chose to see it as a debt to be collected instead of a gift to be cherished. I stood up then, not in anger, but in sorrowful authority. The law has handled the rest, but this between you and me. You are no longer welcome in this house. You are no longer welcome in my life. The boy I loved, my sister's son, is gone, and I mourn him. But the man standing before me, I do not know, and I do not wish to. He was deflated. The fight went out of him, not with a bang, but with a whimper. The truth spoken not with screaming, but with devastating, gentle clarity, was a weapon he had no defense against. He looked at Chloe, who met his gaze with a strength I knew she had found within herself, and he had nothing left to say. He turned and walked out the door, and I have not seen him since. The resolution was not joyful. It was heavy, and it was sad, but it was clean. It was final. I had my home. I had my peace. And I had the profound, quiet knowledge that I had not lost my ability to love. I had only learned to direct it toward those who would cherish it, not weaponize it. I had transitioned from trusting blindly to trusting wisely. And that, my dear, is a victory that no one can ever steal.
So you see, my dear one, this story was never about the villain. It was always about the healing, the journey from a wound to wisdom. I learned that the highest form of self-love is not a relentless, open-hearted trust, but the courage to build a beautiful, strong gate around your heart, a gate that swings wide for those who come with genuine love and closes firmly and finally against those who come with hidden knives. Boundaries are not a rejection of the world. They are the definition of your own sacred space. They are how you say, "This is my peace, and I will protect it." My radical trust was not a weakness. It was a strength that was simply misplaced. I have learned to place it now in myself, in my own intuition, in the quiet voice that I once so stubbornly ignored. This is the legacy of that terrible, beautiful time, the understanding that we can be broken, and yet we can reassemble ourselves into something stronger, wiser, and more beautifully complex than before. The cracks become part of our design, letting in a new, more nuanced light. If this story has helped you feel a little less alone in your own struggles, if it has whispered a truth to your own heart, then please do me the honor of subscribing to our little sanctuary here. We are a circle of souls learning to protect our peace. And if you are ready for the next step on your own empowered journey, to learn the 3 simple, unshakable rules I live by now to guard my heart without closing it, then I invite you to click on the recommended video you see on your screen now. It is the perfect next chapter, my dear, a practical guide to building your own beautiful, unbreachable gate. Thank you for walking this path with me tonight. You are not alone. Remember, your peace is your power. Guard it well. Of course, my dear, the fire is still burning, and the most important part of the story, the healing, awaits us. Let us continue this intimate narration, moving from the climax of the confrontation into the deep, quiet waters of wisdom. The silence that settled in this house after Julian left was different from the one that came before. The earlier silence was heavy with dread, thick with unspoken truths. This new silence, this was a clean, empty space, a sanctuary reclaimed. It was not without its sorrow, mind you. Grief is a tenant that never fully vacates. It just moves into a smaller room in your heart. I grieved for the nephew I had loved, for the future I had imagined for us, for the sheer wasteful tragedy of it all. But beneath that grief, like the first green shoots after a forest fire, was a profound sense of peace, my own peace, not one borrowed or given or vulnerable to the whims of another. It was mine, forged in the crucible of betrayal and tempered by my own courageous choice to end the cycle. The legal matters were finalized with a few more stamps and signatures. The house was legally, irrevocably mine again. The funds were restored, but the true work of reclamation happened within these 4 walls and within the chambers of my own soul. The first thing I did was have all the locks changed, not just on the doors, but on the windows, the garden shed, everything. The metallic click of the new deadbolt sliding into place was a more powerful mantra than I had ever whispered. It was a sound that said, "I am safe. I am secure." And then I began to refill the silence with chosen sounds. I invited Chloe over more often. We did not dwell on the past, not at first. We baked bread.
The simple, primal act of kneading dough, of watching it rise, of filling the house with its wholesome scent. It was a balm. We sat in this very room, and I read poetry to her. Mary Oliver, Wendell Berry, words about belonging to oneself, about the stubborn persistence of life. I watched her slowly unfurl, like a flower finally reaching the sun. Her pregnancy progressed, a beautiful, swelling promise in the midst of our shared recovery. We never spoke of Julian. We were building something new, a friendship not based on a shared connection to him, but on a shared journey out of his shadow. We were two women, one young, one not so young, learning together what it meant to build a life on a foundation of truth, not fantasy. It was during those quiet afternoons, watching the light change in this room, that the lessons of this entire ordeal began to crystallize for me. They distilled from a chaotic, painful experience into 3 simple, unshakable rules. They are the rules I live by now, the rules that protect my peace without building a fortress around my heart. They are the 3 simple rules I promised you. And tonight, because you have been such a devoted listener, because you have held space for this story, I will share them with you now. Consider it a key, not to my home, but to the garden of your own well-being. The first rule: trust the echo, not the word. People can say anything, my dear. They can weave beautiful promises with their words, painting castles in the air. But words are cheap. What is costly and what is real is the echo of their actions. Do not listen to what someone says they will do. Observe what they have already done. Do not be swayed by grand declarations of love or loyalty. Watch the small, unconscious acts, how they speak to a waiter, how they treat an animal, whether they return a shopping cart. The pattern of their actions is the true echo of their character. It never lies. I chose to hear Julian's words of gratitude and future success, while ignoring the echoing pattern of his secretive behavior, his constant need for rescue, his entitlement. Now, I listen to the echo. It is the most truthful sound in the world. The second rule: your no is a complete sentence. For so long, I believed that no was a harsh word, a rejection, a failure of my generous spirit. I thought I had to cushion it with explanations, apologies, and alternative offers. I have learned that a no spoken clearly and kindly is one of the highest forms of self-respect and, paradoxically, of respect for the other person. It draws a clean, bright line. It saves everyone time and heartache. A no to a request for money you cannot spare is a yes to your financial security. A no to a demand on your time and energy is a yes to your peace. A no to toxic behavior is a yes to your very soul. You do not need to justify, argue, defend, or explain your no. It is yours. It is enough. Practice it. No, thank you. I'm afraid that won't be possible for me. It will feel strange at first, like wearing a new shoe, but soon it will become the most comfortable garment you own. The third rule: tend your own garden first. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot save someone who is content to drown you both. For years, I was so busy tending to Julian's garden, watering his dreams, pruning his failures, trying to force his soil to bloom, that I neglected my own passions, my own quiet joys, my own spiritual and emotional well-being began to wither. I was so focused on being his son that I forgot to turn my face to my own light. Now I know that my first and sacred duty is to tend to my own inner landscape, to ensure my own cup is full. This is not selfishness, it is sustainability. only from a place of personal abundance can you offer genuine, healthy love to others. It is the difference between giving from your overflow, which is a gift, and giving from your essence, which is a sacrifice that ultimately breeds resentment. So tend your own dreams. Pull the weeds of negative self-talk. Bask in the sunlight of your own accomplishments. Make your inner world so beautiful that whether anyone else visits it or not, you are content to live there. These 3 rules, they are my compass now. They guided me as I helped Chloe find a small apartment of her own, as I stood by her side in the hospital when her beautiful daughter, Ilara, was born, a child whose middle name is Hope. They guide my interactions with everyone now, from the cashier at the market to my oldest friends. They have not made me hard. They have made me clear. They have given me a discernment I never possessed before. So you see, my dear, the story did not end with a victory in court. It ended here, in this chair, with this understanding. He stole my whole life, the life I thought I was supposed to have. But in its place, I built a fortress I have learned to build within myself. And that, my dear, that is a life that can never be taken. Remember, your peace is your power. Guard it well. Good night, my dear, and thank you for listening.